अगर आप इस टाइम पर भी 3 आवर टेस्ट नहीं लिख रहे हो, यू रिमेंबर कि आप कितना पीछे जा चुके हो आप बाकियों के कंपैरिजन में। प्रैक्टिस 3 आवर टेस्ट, प्लीज प्रैक्टिस 3 आवर टेस्ट। India's developmental policies. I talk about India's development policies since independence. India got independence in 1947. There were not too many policies that were being focused upon. We have 3 sectors of economy, sir. We have covered that: agriculture, industry, then we have services, then we have, sir, infrastructure. So you need to think first of all, policies adopted in the various sectors of an economy. Colonial regime, what policies have been adopted by the colonial regime? So first you have to look at the sectors. LPG is about liberalization, which means dismantling the barriers. Are you getting my point? Hello and welcome students to Pulse IAS. So guys, we are continuing with our economy lecture series, guys, and now we will be talking about India's developmental policies. Definitely, if you remember in the last lecture, I have given you an idea that, okay, what are the various development models? Various development models, what are the criticism in particular development model? What are the unique things about different development models? But in the end of the previous lectures, at the end of the previous lecture, I have highlighted that how India's development models, or how India has adopted these development models in different phases. Yes or no? But this lecture, today's lecture, is about little bit going into specifics of India's development policy, so that you will realize that, okay, how these policies align. These policies are specific. How these policies align with the broad development models that India was pursuing since independence. I'm pretty sure that you guys must be remembering this kind of development model, development approaches of India that have been adopted since independence. Please do remember that, and we have seen the examples also. But now let me go a little bit more into this particular aspect. See, something which has to be read in a timeline manner or in a life cycle manner, in an evolutionary manner, especially like you see about the world history. You read world history in the timeline manners or the evolutionary scale, yes or no? Whenever you do that, whenever you read, try to read of certain things in that particular manner, you have to read that, try to read in a manner that there is a cause and effect relationship. So what I'm trying to highlight here, that something which you will be reading it on an evolutionary scale, try to observe this thing that is known as cause-effect relationship. Cause-effect relationship. I'll explain to you and I'll show you how this cause-effect relationship works very nicely. See, I don't teach world history. I don't know the content, but I know how to remember that. You can remember the world history. You can remember the modern history very easily. And that relationship is known as cause-effect relationship. Try to observe this thing. Let us see. See, if I talk about India's development policy since independence. When India got independence? India got independence in 1947. And I would say that till 3 years, till the time the elections were not conducted, the policies, they were not majorly adopted, I would say. There were not too many policies that were being focused upon. Actually, the policies that started to be adopted, implemented from the first 5-year plan that was adopted in 1951. Clear? But still, from 1947 till 1965. This is the period when I say mainly it's a period of Nehruvian legacy. So we have to understand the policies adopted by our first prime minister, former prime minister, that is Jawaharlal Nehru. What policies have been adopted, why he has adopted all that. Try to remember, putting the context in mind. Put the context. Clear? Then from 1965 till 1991, we will be covering another phase. From 1965 to 1991, this is another phase. Many developments happened during this phase. Clear? This I would say phase 2. Then till 1991, from 1991 onwards, till 2014. Clear? Till 2014, this is the adoption of LPG reforms. Why I'm saying 2014? Because after that, what happened? The Planning Commission got disbanded, and there come the enactment of, or the creation of, Niti Aayog. Clear? But now, if I want you to think that, okay, what our prime minister, what policies our prime minister would have adopted at the time of independence, think that in the agriculture, first of all, how would you think that, okay, we have 3 sectors of economy, sir, we have covered that: agriculture, industry, then we have services, then we have, sir, infrastructure. Yes or no? So, sir, can you elaborate on that aspect? So you need to think first of all, policies adopted in the various sectors of an economy. Apart from that, social sector, poverty, all those, you can think of that. But what policies will be adopted in that sector? That depend upon what is the state of Indian economy on the eve of independence. Yes or no? What is the state of Indian economy on the eve of independence? Like, let me tell you, like, suppose based on what level, at what level you are, your preparation is, that only will decide now what policies will you adopt to improve this current state of Indian economy. Yes or no? Like, based on your current level of preparation, you only will be able to think, acha, now I have to read this particular subject, now I have to read this particular subject, now I have to do answer writing. Yes or no? But this state of Indian economy that has happened because of whom? Because of the colonial regime. So what policies that have adopted during the colonial regime that led to such poor state, backward state of Indian economy? So you remember, cause, what is the cause of such a state? The policies that we are going to see. The effect of this relationship, is the poor state. I'll highlight that, sir, why, what is the poor state? Now, because of this effect, it will become the cause for the policies to be adopted during Nehruvian legacy. Are you getting my point? Because of this cause, this will become one of the cause for the policies to be adopted during this. And this Nehruvian legacy will result into some impact. It will have some effect. We'll discuss that. Don't worry, we'll discuss that. Now, once you look at the effect of the Nehruvian legacy, you will realize that this effect will become the cause for the set of policies to be adopted in the next phase. This effect is going to be the cause. I'm telling you, one of the major causes for the next set of policies to be adopted during this period. And then the overall impact till here, the overall impact till 1990 will result into the cause of the policies that was adopted in 1991, that is LPG reforms. One of the major cause. Are you getting my point? This is called, we call it as the cause-effect relationship. This is what we call it as cause-effect relationship. And let me tell you, this approach works nicely, fantastically in the evolutionary manner. This is how, like, I have prepared my notes for the world history, for the modern history, somehow, so that I can remember it easily. Let me now start this lecture and use such this cause-effect relationship, and I'm pretty sure then you will be remembering the developmental policies very easily. Clear? So first of all, I'll be starting with the colonial regime. Colonial regime. Colonial regime, what policies have been adopted by the colonial regime? So first you have to look at the sectors. So in the agriculture, what was the colonial policy that was adopted? One, I would say, one, exploitative land revenue policies. Yes or no? We have discussed this in agriculture already. Exploitative land revenue policies, plus the land revenue has to be paid in cash. Exploitative plus land revenue has to be mainly paid in cash. Second, the state, the British state at that time, they did not undertake as such in state investment. They did not try to reform the agriculture. So there was low state investment in improving agriculture. So low state investment in agriculture. Already discussed, guys. Detailed discussed in our agriculture. Next, second. Now, second sector is industrial sector, guys. This industrial sector, if you try to understand what policies have been adopted by the British in the industrial sector. First is Britain's industrial revolution happened at this period of time. Yes or no? Again, this we have discussed in our industrial sector chapter. Britain's industrial revolution happened in this time. And due to that, the British adopted the policies while exporting of raw materials from India, such as cotton, jute, tea, indigo, all that, and exporting the raw materials or buying raw materials, you can say this will be good. Importing raw materials from India and exporter of cheap manufactured machine-made goods. Cheap manufactured machine-made goods to India. Clear? Not only that, the third policy that was undertaken with respect to foreign trade. Again, this idea was discussed. It's just like more like summarizing the stuff, guys. So in the foreign trade, haven't I told you that Britain adopted a one-way free trade system? What I mean with the one-way free trade system, in a sense, like that Britain, the country, they imposed heavy duties, heavy protectionist tariffs on Indian goods, Indian exported goods. So Indians, the handicrafts, which were in huge demand, on that they imposed heavy goods, heavy tariffs. But on the other hand, these tariffs, we call it as heavy protectionist tariffs. But on the other hand, British goods, which were like machine made, they were brought to India without being paid any tariff. Why? Because British was holding a political control over India. So Britain goods were entering into India without giving any tariffs, without charging any tariffs. But on the other hand, Indian goods to the Britain market, they were charged with high tariffs, heavy tariffs. Clear? That is one-way free trade policy. Second, I have already told you the nature of the foreign trade. If you look at nature of the foreign trade, it is like that British was importing raw materials from India and sending the cheap manufactured goods to the India. This is the nature of the foreign trade that happened. And the fourth set of policies, that is in infrastructure. Now, what happened in infrastructure, guys? In infrastructure, that lead to investment. We have seen huge investments in the expansion of railway lines, roads, yes or no, or telegraph. The point is, all this investment that have been made in the infrastructure that made the access of economic resources from India very easy. Because now, after the investment in these infrastructure, which has led the Britain to tap the resources from the remotest part of the India and send their cheap machine made goods to the remotest part of the country. Now, imagine when such policies that have been adopted by the Britain for the India, tell me what will be the impact of this. If you try to understand, the impact of this will be with respect to agriculture. Try to understand what is happening. With respect to agriculture, if I tell you, it is leading to, don't you think so, that this land revenue policies are, along with low state investment, leading to a stagnant and backward agriculture? Yes or no? Stagnant and backward agriculture. Plus, not just only stagnant and backward, low productivity, because you have not been able to adopted technology. Low productivity. The yield per hectare was very low because you were not able to adopt the technology. And why you were not adopt the technology? You were not having security of tenure. Already discussed, guys, in the agriculture. So I'm not going to elaborate. Just mentioning the points here. Poor technological adoption. So the Indian agriculture, that's why we are saying it is mainly a backward agriculture on the eve of independence. It was mainly a backward agriculture on the eve of independence, with the having cultivation was mainly dependent upon the primitive tools. Poor technological adoption. When there's a poor technological adoption, what do you think about the productivity? Tell me. Poor technological adoption. Then land fragmentation, regressive agrarian structure. All of these points have been covered. And the last one more point is commercialization of agriculture. This point I'm highlighting because I'll be coming up later, the use of this point, commercialization of agriculture. Now, what happened with this commercialization? What I mean with the commercialization is that Indian farmers, they were mainly cultivating cash crops rather than the food crops. And why they were cultivating cash crops? Because they were in good demand. They were able to get the land revenue. They were able to get the money in the form of cash. And that cash was used to pay the exorbitant land revenue. That cash was used to pay like the revenue, land revenue. And that has to be done in cash. So thereby the farmers, the agriculture system that became dominant there at that time was commercialization. That means the cultivation of more of cash crops than the food crops. The trend was happening towards the cultivation of cash crops. Clear? This was the kind of policies that hampered the Indian agriculture. Then when we talk about the industrial sector, now tell me, when this industrial sector combined with this foreign trade, combined with this infrastructure, what kind of the impact it would create? The impact it is going to create is first, deindustrialization. Deindustrialization, we can easily understand. Deindustrialization, that is decline of our large traditional handicraft industry. The thing, guys, try to understand our handicrafts which were in huge demand, they got declined, deindustrialized, systematically deindustrialized. Look at this. Britain industrial revolution happened. They needed the raw materials. They import the raw materials from our country and export the cheaply made machine goods to our country. How will our goods, traditionally artisan handicrafts, will be able to compete with this cheap machine made? Add to that is when you adopt such unfair trade policies, don't you think this is systematic destruction of Indian industries? And it's not when you are like, no, 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 we have to plunder the complete country. You invest not for India's benefit, not at all. What you do, you invest in the infrastructure so that you tap the resources, the natural resources from India, raw material, feed their industries so that they produce the goods at the cheapest rate, and then those goods were being sold to India at a higher price, or whatever that those goods were sold to India. How our goods, traditional handicrafts industry, will be able to compete with this? Think how this will be able to compete with this. This is called systematic destruction that has happened. Clear? Now, just add one point to this. When deindustrialization happened, don't you think there is a lack of employment opportunities then? Loss of livelihood. This deindustrialization lead to loss of livelihood. Now just tell me, when this loss of livelihood, from where will these people go? They need some money to generate for their livelihood. So where will these people go? They will go to the agriculture, resulting into overcrowding of agriculture. And when there is overcrowding of agriculture, already the agriculture which was doing the cultivation based on primitive technology, now there is too much dependency. Don't you think the productivity further declines? Yes, this productivity further declines. Land fragmentation increases. I hope you are able to understand now. Land fragmentation increases. This was the state of our sectors at that point of time. This was the state. Now, when you see agriculture was not doing well, industrial sector was not doing well, now look at the social sectors now. What do you think? Poverty at the time of independence, don't you think it will be very high? When income is not there, will you be able to invest in your education? There is wide illiteracy, health issues, prevalence of diseases at that point of time, because the state though was not making any efforts in improving this social security. Leave aside social security, you are not giving them opportunity to generate income. So how will you be expecting, oh, the colonial rule will uplift the Indian people? How will you expect? You are dumb to expect that the colonial rule would be uplifting, would be investing in our health, would be investing in our education. No. Now imagine this is the state of Indian economy on the eve of independence. This is the state. That is the vicious cycle of poverty, characterized by one of the lowest per capita consumption. Vicious cycle of poverty, characterized by one of the lowest per capita consumption. Now, when income is not there, try to understand. Obviously, when income is not there, why income is not there? Livelihood is not there. Why livelihood not there? Systematic destruction of industries. Now, the people went to agriculture. Agriculture already overcrowded, combined with high land revenue policies, combined with land fragmentation, combined with low technological adoption, resulted into low income. So thereby low level of savings. When our economy will not be having much savings, like if you are not able to save some amount of money, will you be investing? No. So low level of savings, and thereby capital formation will be low, and this result into low productivity in an economy. वो बोलते हैं ना, पैसे से पैसा जनरेट होता है, लेकिन उसके लिए पैसा तो होना चाहिए, but the savings is low. Put it in your context. If your parents do not have surplus, then will they be able to invest in buying a particular home? No. They are like, no, we cannot be putting or building a house. We do not have savings. Clear? Then, Indian economy was mainly rural and agrarian. Already told you why it was so. Unbalanced occupational structure, with 70% of working population engaged in agriculture. Discuss this point also. The country was not self-sufficient in food and raw materials. Why the country was not self-sufficient? The reason, let me give it to you. commercialization of Indian agriculture. Commercialization. When the Indian agriculture plus low productivity, this is mainly because of poor performance of Indian agriculture, plus even whatever it is performing, it is skewed towards cash crops, and that is the result of colonial policies, because of which you are dependent upon the other countries for your meeting the basic needs, food grains. I told you, USPL 480 program, guys. Clear? Illiteracy was as high as 84%. Majority of children did not attend school. Mass communicable diseases were widespread, and in the absence of good public health service, mortality rates were very high. All these characteristics clearly show that we were an underdeveloped economy at that point of time. और ये मैंने आपको एक लेक्चर लिया है इंडस्ट्रियल सेक्टर, उसमें कंसेप्ट बताया था इंडियाज स्ट्रक्चरल ट्रांसफॉर्मेशन. नाउ यू इमेजिन दैट एट द टाइम ऑफ इंडिपेंडेंस हाउ इंडियाज इकोनॉमी shows characteristic which matches with the underdeveloped economy. Clear? We were at that stage of the structural transformation, the primary stage. Clear? So overall, if you see, the economy was faced with the problem of poverty, mass poverty, ignorance, diseases which were aggravated by unequal distribution of resources between groups and the regions. Clear? Now, coming back. This is the state I have shown you. This is the context. Imagine now, just in your mind, imagine in this situation. Imagine the situation, our freedom fighters, our constitution makers, our political leaders of that time, that what they will take, what decision they will take. Now, they were given an option. Just after independence, they faced a very serious question. There was a serious debate that what model of economic development should be thought for India. Now, when I say what model of economic development, because I have told you, look at this. Look at the state of Indian economy. Now, we have to bring our country out of this state. We have to make our country from the underdeveloped to the developing to the developed. Yes or no? Every country just after independence thought of one thing. How can we become a developed economy as fast as possible? That was a simple thing that was thought of. Not just only in India, among the various countries that were decolonized at that point of time. They simply aimed that how can we move to a developed economy? How can we move to a developed economy as fast as possible? So India has to adopt now a model of economic development so that it undertakes a process of development from this state to this state to this state to this state. Yes or no? How can we do that? So there was a question. This was a question. And in that there were two choices. And what was those two choices? Whether should we go for a capitalist model of economic development? Capitalist model of economic development, that means led by a private sector, or should we go for a socialist model of economic development? Socialist model of economic development that is led by government. Clear? Now, that was the question. Now, why was it a question? Let me tell you, Indian independence, like Indian freedom fighters, the constitution makers, they were very clear for one thing, that we are going for a democracy in our country. Are you getting my point? We were very clear on one thing, that we are going for a democracy. We will be going for a democratic society in our country. We will be giving the freedom of speech, freedom like free expression. That is what independence, like they were striving for. And this was made very, very clear in various Congress sessions, especially if you look at the Karachi Congress session 1931. So they were made very clear. So when I say democracy, fine, democracy means you are giving the freedom to express for their free expression. Now, this democracy, guys, aligns with a broader philosophy, that is liberalism. Are you getting my point? This democracy is, you can say, a political manifestation, of a broader philosophy, that is liberalism. This democracy is a political manifestation of a broader philosophy, that is liberalism. Liberalism, which allows for no barriers, allows for freedom. Now, when you apply such concept, when you are applying this philosophy of liberalism in the economy, it results in a model known as economic manifestation is capitalism. Economic manifestation is capitalism. Are you getting my point? Economic manifestation is capitalism. Why? Because in the capitalism, you are like allowing the private sector also to operate freely. Yes or no? It's not like you are saying them, hey, listen, you can't enter into this particular sector. Because if you do so, then how can you say that this philosophy is ingrained in our society, liberalism? So that's why I'm telling you, there was a serious question, there was a discussion, because on one hand, we are going for democracy. We are going for a democracy in the political aspect, but are we ready to go for capitalist model of economic development? No. There are reasons, I'll tell you why. There are various factors. There are various factors that has shattered this capitalism in the international arena. Not only this capitalism as a model of economic development. Not only this model, capitalism as a model of economic development, were disregarded in the international arena, but we were very clear even before independence that we were not going for this capitalism. We will be going for a model of economic development which is tilted towards socialist model. Yes or no? That, just give me a minute. So we were very clear even before independence that we are going to have a model of economic development tilted towards socialism. Sir, why are you saying this? Let me give you guys, and I'm pretty sure you guys have a very good history also, must have covered a good idea. Let me give you an aspect. We were very clear that we are going to have a model of economic development tilted towards socialist. Two reasons. There were factors, if I talk about domestic, and there were factors which is international factors. So in the international arena, first of all, let me give you international arena. In the international arena, guys, it was made very clear that capitalism as a model of economic development was disregarded. Why? First is Great Depression 1929. Great Depression 1929, it shattered the myth that, hey, capitalism is the only model for achieving or for becoming the fast developed economy. That myth was busted. That myth was busted that the capitalist model, होता है ना कि भगवान है, ना कोई भगवान नहीं है, ये भी गिर सकता है. तो आप यही सोचो ना, एक ह्यूमिलिटी रखो, कोई भगवान नहीं है. आई एम टेलिंग यू, द बिगेस्ट ऑफ द बिग कंपनीज in the world, in India, now you see this model of economic development which was regarded as a god, kind of a god itself, that okay, the country needs to develop, they have to go for a capitalist model. But this Great Depression clearly busted this myth that capitalism model can also falter. This Great Depression impacted those countries severely who adopted this capitalist model of development. But do you know what? One important thing also emerged along this line of Great Depression. There was erstwhile Soviet Union. Erstwhile Soviet Union became an economic superpower. Became an economic superpower. And when I say it became an economic superpower, it became with the adoption of, it did not went for this capitalism. It went with the adoption of planned approach to growth. Adoption of planned approach. Adoption of planned approach. Yes or no? Adoption of planned approach. So not only the countries were struggling who have adopted the like capitalist model, they were struggling, guys, seriously struggling with the those with the economy who have adopted the capitalism model. But on the other hand, the Soviet Union, the erstwhile Soviet Union, who adopted the planned approach to the economic growth, it became an economic superpower. And during this period, this was practical experience. During this period, your Keynesian economics came into picture, which provided a philosophy. Your Keynesian economics came into picture. What is that Keynesian economics? Keynesian economics clearly highlighted that central government or the government should play a major role in stimulating or boosting the economy. We have covered in our prelims lectures. So, Keynesian economics clearly highlighted that the government plays a very important role in boosting the aggregate demand of an economy. Why are you not bringing the government in the economy? Why have you kept the government at the side? Why? Why have you not allowed the government to intervene in an economy? Why? So, Keynesian economics provided that philosophical thought. And lastly, fourth, not only this, if I talk about to deal with Great Depression, the US adopted New Deal program. Yes or no? The US adopted New Deal program. What is this New Deal program? New Deal program was government-led economic reconstruction program. Remember, government-led reconstruction. So the country that shows, hey, listen, capitalist model, that shows the importance of private sector in the economy, that itself, when it goes for a government-led economic reconstruction, don't you think the other countries will also see this hypocrisy? Don't you think the other country will also recognize that no, government should play an important role in an economy? Are you getting my point? Not only that, even after World War II, this New Deal program post Great Depression, just keep writing one line, that is New Deal program that was adopted in bracket government-led economic reconstruction. But another point is Marshall Plan. This Marshall Plan, again, it was adopted post World War II. Yes or no? It was adopted post World War II. Again, it was a government-led economic reconstruction, European reconstruction program. Clear? So what is the idea that was emerging here? That the model in the model of economic growth, or you look at the role of the government was not limited. They were not negligible. Instead, the government plays a very important role. So in the international arena, when these things were happening, try to understand, in the international arena, when these things were happening, in the domestic also certain other things were happening. Like, first, emergence of left parties in the 1920s. In our freedom struggle, don't you see the left parties that have emerged, giving us socialist angle also, clearly highlighting that, hey, listen, when we go for development, it was not, when we get the Indian independence, it is not that we will give you or we will go for a capitalist model. The trends were started. Remember the creation of Communist Party of India. Then there was a CSP, Congress Socialist Party, within the Congress. Not only that, do you remember that HRA, Hindustan Republic Association, even that turned into HSRA, Hindustan Socialist Republican Association? My point is, the socialist angle, the left angle, that was getting an edge. It was getting an edge. Not only that, chalo fine, you were like, no, sir, but still in the Congress session, even the Karachi Congress session, look at the Karachi Congress session. Karachi's Congress session 1931. This also highlighted clearly that no, we will go for a planned approach to a development. The policies, if you look at here, that is about the economic program, clearly indicates that. And it became evident when there was a national planning committee was set up. I am just missing the year. 1936, I think. Just let me see. National Planning Committee that was set up under the chairmanship of Jawaharlal Nehru. National Planning Committee was set up under the chairmanship of Jawaharlal Nehru. I'm not sure, please confirm this session by yourself. I think when Subhash Chandra Bose was the president. Still, I'm not saying it. Please, this you confirm. See, years are very important to make your answer specific. But National Planning Committee was set up. Why it was set up? Because the idea was getting clear and clear that we are not going for a private sector led model. And then at the last, that very important thing that happened was Bombay Plan 1944. Now, in the Bombay Plan, guys, the top industrialists at that point of time, they came together. The top industrialists of that time came together and even they agreed for state-led economic development model. Are you getting my point? Even they agreed for state-led development model. And they are like that we do not have the resources to invest in infrastructure. We do not have much resources to invest in the capital industry for which the returns are going to come little bit later. We don't have that much resources. So even the private sector, can you imagine the top industrialists coming together, and when they also give you the support that, hey state, take this baton of economic development in your hands. And that is the reason it was made very clear that India went for a planned approach, or I would not write like this. India went for a, I'm just writing it here. India went for a mixed economy in which public sector has to play a strong role, strong public sector, supported by a private sector. It's not completely going into, let me tell you this also, guys. It did not went completely into the socialist model also, the model of economic development that was adopted by the erstwhile Soviet Union. Why? Because that would have resulted into the state owning the various factors of production. And that would actually curb the democratic tendencies. So even India somehow adopted a model which is unique in its own aspect. We did not go for this, the reasons I have here. But why we could not go for the socialist model of the economic development as adopted by the erstwhile Soviet Union? Because that would go against our democratic principles. Yes or no? Because socialist is what? State controlling the factors of production. So that is also going against the democracy, the freedom aspect. So thereby, India is like, yes, we adopted a mixed economy. The public sector has to play a strong role, supported by private sector. And thereby, this resulted in the beginning of a planned approach to economic development. Beginning of a planned approach to economic development. Now, why planned approach? What it means planned? This also, let me give you a simple idea. See, what are the things that you can plan? Like you are writing mains. Now you are writing mains this year and you are like, sir, like this is my preparation and I have planned this at this particular time. Why are you able to plan these things? Because that was in your hands. Something which is in your not hands, will you be able to plan that perfectly? No. No. Something which is not in your hands, you will not be able to plan perfectly. Now, at this point of time, the major resources were owned by the government. Private sector was having very limited resources. So thereby, when private sector, suppose if I say 100 rupees in economy, majorly that was in the government hand. The private sector was having very low level of savings. We have discussed that idea. So thereby, when it comes, suppose 70, 80 rupees if the government have. So government is like, okay, now let me take initiative, let me plan. Okay, out of 80 rupees, 10 rupees will go to this sector, in this sector, particular scheme. Yes or no? That is what plan here. So this is, we call it as a planned approach to the economic development. And this planned approach is started with the adoption of first 5-year plan. Adoption of first 5-year plan in 19 first 5-year plan, that is in 1951. Clear? From here our planned approach to economic development is started. Planning commission was constituted in 1950, created the first 5-year plan, and from there the first, or you can say the first 5-year plan or the planned approach to the economic development is started. Clear? Now, let us move to the Nehruvian legacy. Now, with the Nehruvian legacy, in the Nehruvian legacy, it's actually mostly comprises of 3 5-year plans. Nehruvian legacy mostly comprises of 3 5-year plans, 1951 to 1956, 56 to 61, 61 to 1951 to 61 to 66. 61 to 66. Yes, after that 3 annual plans. Clear? So Nehruvian legacy, yes, our first former Prime Minister was Jawaharlal Nehru. He died in 1964. But that's why I'm telling you, no, the first 3 5-year plans were mainly guided by the Nehruvian, that is the strategy that was adopted. Now we have given you this context. At this context, what policies do you think, what policies would have been adopted? First, when it comes to the agriculture. Now, one context is obviously we are just getting independence. And there's a very nice line that is given in the NCERT itself. Without economic dependence, political independence is of no use. Without economic dependence, political independence is of no use. And what it means here is, at this point of time, on the eve of independence, do you know how much our goods, like how much we were importing? How much of capital goods we were importing? More than 80%. More than 80% of our capital goods requirement, capital goods, the machineries, they were imported. So while we become political independent, but we were not having the economic independence. And when you are relying that much on the other country for fulfilling your basic capital goods, the machinery that is needed for that forms the base for the another industries, how can you depend on these capital goods on the other countries? No, that means you have not achieved economic independence. Plus, at the same time, again, one context, Indian agriculture was in a poor shape. Yes or no? Indian agriculture was in a poor shape. I told you, the stagnant, backward, low primitive. But there was one important thing, I think that was missed during the policies that were adopted during that legacy period. What was that? We were not self-sufficient in the food grains. But I don't know, I think this aspect was missed there. Because the policies which I'm going to highlight, you will realize that created a serious detrimental impact on the self-sufficiency, food self-sufficiency. So let me highlight that. See, while there are policies with respect to IR or the political, I am not going to talk about that. I am here to talk about the economic policies, guys. Please, now bear with me with that idea. So with the Nehruvian legacy, the policies that were adopted, when I say with respect to agriculture, he knew agriculture needs to be improved. He knew poverty needs to be eliminated. He knew that. That's why during this phase, land reforms were adopted. Land reforms were adopted. So land reforms was majorly chosen as a tool. Land reforms were majorly chosen as a tool to improve agricultural productivity, to solve the problems of agriculture. There was some other program like community development program that was also adopted during this period. But major tool to reform the agriculture, that was the land reforms. And we have discussed the land reforms in detail. So I'm not going to talk about that. But the major policy, if I talk about the major policy or the major focus of this 5-year plan, that was on having that economic independence. And having that economic independence, how it can be achieved? It was based upon Nehru-Mahalanobis strategy. Nehru-Mahalanobis strategy. Now, what I mean with this? This strategy emphasized upon focus on heavy industrialization, heavy goods. That is the capital goods, the example which I have given it to you. Focus on heavy industrialization, which is state-led industrialization. Not only that, the strategy that was pursued was import substitution strategy. Import substitution strategy. In short, giving protection to our domestic industry, the newly raised domestic industry. Protection to our domestic industry. And at the same time, the focus was on balanced regional development. Balanced regional development. That means the industries will be given licenses very, very easily. They will be very, very easily if they are being developed in some backward region. So they will be able to get the licenses very, very easily. Now, sir, how can I say? Guys, haven't we covered industrial sector? अब आप लोगों को समझ में आ रहा होगा कि सर क्यों आप सबसे पहले एग्रीकल्चर पढ़ाते हो, फिर इंडस्ट्री पढ़ाते हो, फिर इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर एंड देन एक्चुअली द इकोनॉमिक पोर्शन. क्योंकि ये इकोनॉमिक पोर्शन में गाइस यू रिक्वायर द पॉलिसीज दैट वर अडॉप्टेड इन द रिस्पेक्टिव सेक्टर्स. आर यू गेटिंग माय पॉइंट? It requires the policies that were adopted. क्योंकि अब मैं आपको बोल रहा हूं focus on heavy industrialization, state led. Sir, can you not simply tell me the IPR, the specific fact? IPR 1956. Can you not clearly tell me that IPR 1956 classifies the industry into 3 schedules? Schedule A can only be or exclusively reserved for whom? The public sector. Schedule B, private sector is open, but those industries will be progressively state-owned. Schedule C, those industries are left open to the private sectors. So when these things are, when you have that specific, you can substantiate these points. That, sir, we understood that point, that it is a state-led industrialization combined with import substitution strategy. Are you getting my point? State-led combined with the import substitution. Why? You see, Britain Industrial Revolution that happened in the 1750s even, they gave the protection to their industries. Why shouldn't we? I think this was not a bad thing, that giving an import substitution strategy. You have to give protection to your amateur or the newly growing industry, infant industries. You have to give protection. Just imagine, I know, like I'm raising a daughter. I know in the first few years, you have to give protection. You have to protect your daughter. But then slowly, you expose them to the school. There, she will be interacting with the other students. But in the beginning, first year, second year, you protect them, giving them protection, teach them, yes or no, like that. In the same way, industries, especially the infant industry, they need protection from the competition. And you imagine India's industrial evolution, actually it is happening after 200 years of Britain's industrial evolution. Yes or no? Almost after 200 years of Britain's industrial evolution, our industrial evolution is shooting. And how can we expect, hey, listen, hey, India's industrial evolution will beat, or India's industry will beat Britain industry? Their industries, yeah, have started, like they have adopted the technology since 200 years before than ours. So you see to that aspect. So if you look at this part, the first 3-5 year plan, yes, agriculture, I would say, was kind of neglected, because there simply you were like completely relying on the land reforms. But in the industry, the major focus of the first 3-5 year plans, that major focus was on the industrial development. And especially which industry? Heavy industries. Heavy industries. And that is led by the state. Now, let me give you a critical analysis of these first 3-5 year plan as such. Obviously, overall economy performed impressively as compared, it is not during, as compared with the colonial period. Clear? Plus, you see, my whole point is, if you look at the sector which contribute more, when you like, no, I told you this about the concept of productivity already when we discussed the concept of structural transformation. So you see, when the industrial sector grow, it will result into higher contribution to GDP as compared to the agriculture. So thereby, when Indian industrial sector grew, economy performed impressively during this period. Even Indian agriculture grew at a good rate, Indian industry grew, and its contribution to GDP increased to 24% from 12%. The goal of self-reliance that was adopted. Public sector captured the commanding heights, as I told you, because it was led by the state. Clear? It made a foundation of strong industrial base plus diversification of industry, which was earlier mainly restricted to consumer goods industry. Earlier, it's not like we did not have an industrial base, but it was a weak industrial base plus skewed towards consumer goods industry at the time of independence, consumer goods. But this industrialization created a very strong industrial base. Let me tell you, I think this achievement have not been mentioned here, but I told you the import of capital goods, that capital goods, to fulfill our capital goods requirement, we were importing around more than 80%. Yes or no? 80%, more than 80% of our capital goods requirement were fulfilled by the imports. But after such policies, like if you see in the 1970s, you will find out that data significantly declined, something around 20%. So that is what the goal, the foundation, realizing the goal of self-reliance, that import of capital goods significantly decline. And I've told you, this is what we call it as diversification of industry. This is what the strong industrial base that have been created. And actually, honestly, if you look at the industrial based, whatever we see, we owe to this policy, Nehru-Malonovich strategy. But we have limited resources. And definitely, when you give a focus on the industrial sector, certain things get neglected. This is what economics is. Economics is all about taking choices. Because there is always trade-off, because there is a scarcity of resources. यही तो basics economy हम पढ़े हैं. That economics is about making a choice, making a decision among the various choices. Yes or no? And why that we have to make a choice? Because of scarcity of resources. Our government at that point of time chosen industry, somehow given priority to develop industry over the agriculture. But when we have done it, obviously, there would have been some consequences. What are the consequences? First, now heavy industries, let me tell you before that, first is neglect of agriculture sector. Now, why I'm saying when it is neglect of agriculture sector, guys, in the 1960s, I'm going to highlight, we witnessed the condition like food famine. Now, even our dependency for that basic needs, that dependency of food grains, that increased. Can you imagine a country becoming just like country who just became independent? We are not self-sufficient in food grains. Can you imagine that? We are not self-sufficient in food grains. We have discussed this idea although. That is USPL 480 program. Not only that, clearly highlighted at the time of first lecture on the agriculture, that how the amount of food grains being imported under this program that was increasing. So when you neglect the agriculture sector, this costed our self-sufficiency in the basic needs. Now, when you can't have independence, when you can't achieve that independence in the basic, what are you talking about this economic independence then? Wrong to say that, no? Not only that, now here the model that was adopted to eradicate poverty, the kind of developmental model that was emerged during this first period, it was about growth-led model. And we have discussed that idea, trickle-down growth-led model. That means no special as such programs were adopted that directly target poverty. No special program as such. But obviously we have discussed this idea that this failure of trickle-down growth model in eradicating poverty. Failure of trickle-down growth model. So you can imagine the policies I told you, this is specific. The policies that we have adopted aligned with our broad development model, that was growth-led development model. Clear? Growth-led, that means trickle down. We were like, the benefits of the economic growth will trickle down. Our economy performed, but it did not trickle down as such. Actually trickle down after 3-4 generations. हमें तो क्या लगता है, ओ इकोनॉमिक ग्रोथ हो रहा है, फिर वो इन्वेस्टमेंट करेंगे, जॉब जनरेट होगी, कंजम्पशन होगा, इंडस्ट्री फिर बढ़ेगी, फिर इन्वेस्टमेंट होगा, लाइक दैट. But no, this takes a lot of time. Clear? Now, during this period, the system that was adopted, the license quota system. Yes or no? All these things we have discussed, guys, in our industrial sector. Now, this license quota that prevented economies of scale. Plus, it prevented competition. Okay? Inadequate attention was given to the small sector. Now, while the economy, public sector captured the commanding heights, there were huge losses. They were running in losses, because they were financed by the budgetary resources. So they do not have as such incentive to adopt technology. Plus, there is no competition with the other goods. So when they are almost like a monopoly in providing such goods, there is no competition. Will they adopt technology? No. When they don't adopt technology, when they don't innovate, their cost of production will be high. When cost of production will be high, don't you think there will be losses? Plus, combined with no incentive to go profitable. They know they are going to survive. They are not going to perish, unlike the private sector. So huge losses. And lastly, heavy industries is highly dependent on import of capital goods. Now we are importing, but we are not exporting. So this resulted in the current account deficit, widening the current account deficit. Clear? This was a critical analysis of first 3 5-year plans. Now, when I say this 1960s, the period that has come, this 1960s, actually the critical analysis, the negative side that I have highlighted happened during this period itself. But this 1960s, why I'm telling you separately, it's a called dangerous decade in our country. And this dangerous decade, because the things were unstable at the political level, at the social level, at the economy level, at the security level. Sir, what are those? instability that is there. First of all, if I talk about at the political level, political instability. Clear? Now, this political instability, if I talk about, first, there were deaths of two prime minister. Our first two prime minister Jawaharlal Nehru, Lal Bahadur Shastri, they died 1964, 1966, thereby raising the concerns, already the concerns of succession. Second, regional parties. The regional parties started to come in the political landscape. Regional parties started to come in the landscape, and we have already seen in the 1959 elections also. If you look at the 1959, the state elections, you would find out that how the regional parties started to come into picture. DMK, AIADMK, you see that part. Clear? So this political there's a kind of uncertainty at the political arena. But more importantly, we are concerned about economic instability that was happening. And sir, what is that economic instability? The major economic instability was agriculture. Agriculture, guys, our import dependency. We were not self-sufficient in the food grain production. And the successive monsoon failures resulted into drought-like situation, drought and famine. Resulted into drought and then leading to famine-like situation. Yes or no? Not only that, I told you during this period, we also witnessed a BOP crisis. Because to build the heavy industry, we need to import capital goods. Obviously, we were going for a heavy industrialization. But even going for heavy industrialization, we need to import capital goods, which widened our current account deficit because we were not exporting anything. We were not, like at that point of time, a leader where we were exporting goods. Nothing. So thereby the BOP crisis that happened. Clear? Then there come another very important instability, that is at the security point of view. Security level of instability. Now what is that security? First is external threat. That is external security threat. And what was that external security threat? To wars with our neighbors. ठीक है, 1971 वाली अभी नहीं देखना. To wars with our neighbors. 1962 Indo-China War, 1965 Indo-Pak War. This is what? External security. Second, internal security. Now what I mean with the internal security here? Internal security, guys, the rise of anti-Naxalite movement. Yes or no? Naxalbari movement. The growth of the rise of Mizo National Front. They were rising. Why they were rising? That's a different concern. Yes or no? But there is more about a discontent. Overall, if I'm telling you, there was a growing disillusionment or discontent being generated or being created among the people here. Just one more kind of instability. Let me just write it down. Social instability. Now, when I say social instability, I'm pretty sure you must be remembering the language protest that happened here. Yes or no? The language protest. Linguistic protest. Around the Official Language Act 1963. And second, there were caste movements. Anti-caste movement, basically anti-caste movements that started to come into picture. So overall, if you look at economy, our economy, if I talk about, you talk from the outside, you talk from the inside, you talk economically, politically, social, everything is going wrong. If you want to solve the problems, you should have a strong political leadership, but nothing at that point of time. Then if you want to tackle this political instability, this wars, we kind of somehow face setback in the Indochina war. Yes or no? That affected the morale of the Indian soldiers. It affected the morale. Plus, these wars cause livelihood issues, economic hardships. Combine this with the problem in the neglect of agriculture, resulting in insufficiency in food, creating famine-like situations. And then, already when these things are happening, don't you think the people, they are like, यार government तो कुछ कर नहीं रही है, plus they are taking our decision, they are banning the English, the language protest again comes into picture here. That's why I'm telling you, 1960s was called as the era of dangerous decade. Now, briefly, when our second Prime Minister, Lal Bahadur Shastri, took over, he was like, what to do? He had two things first of all in mind: how to boost the morale of the soldiers and how to ensure self-secure, like how to ensure self-sufficiency in the food grain production. He was very clear on that. That's why his famous slogan, Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan, that clearly indicated his approach towards dealing with various problems in our country. It's clearly indicated. That is, first is boosting the morale of the soldiers. You have to boost the morale of that soldiers, then only they will be able to undertake any future warlike situation. Yes or no? And second, it is about creating self-sufficiency, and for the self-sufficiency we have discussed. He started with a new agricultural strategy that slowly resulted into the Green Revolution. Yes or no? So overall, 1965-1991, the policies that were adopted, let me highlight to you that. If I highlight the 1965 to 1980, okay, I am just highlighting one, agriculture. Agriculture, the major policy that was adopted here was new agricultural strategy. New agricultural strategy, NAS. NAS, that became Green Revolution. Revolution कोई भी चीज तभी बनती है when it actually resulted into record food grain production. And then we have also seen how this Green Revolution has been adopted. There are different phases of Green Revolution. The first phase of Green Revolution was confined to certain states, the Western UP, the Punjab, the Haryana. Clear? The states where this Green Revolution adoption is possible. We have discussed those concepts. Then slowly, it was like expanding the Green Revolution to the Eastern India. Yes or no? The second phase. The present phase is third. Currently, it is about evergreen revolution. But that we are not putting it here. But then in the second, in the other industry-wise, if I talk about, in the industrial sector, this industrial sector, the policies that were adopted during this industrial sector, they were mainly guided by Indira's socialism. This I say it always, this is mainly guided by Indira's socialism. And let me tell you, Indira's socialism, please try to learn the difference between Nehru's socialism and the Indira's socialism. Indira's socialism is highly tilted towards state-led, highly tilted towards the public, that is state owning the various factors of production. This is highly rigid way of socialism, more aligned with the moving towards the erstwhile Soviet Union. So highly tilted
towards the state. सर हाउ कैन यू से दैट? सर आप पहले भाई बात है ना सर, आप जनरल बात बोलोगे थोड़ी नहीं मैं मान लूंगा। अरे मत मानो, आई एम टेलिंग यू, डोंट वरी। इंडस्ट्रियल सेक्टर, अगेन आई हैव टोल्ड यू नंबर ऑफ थिंग्स हियर। First, here if you look at the industrial sectors, the nationalization policies started to enter. Nationalization policies. Haven't we discussed the nationalization, banking nationalization in 1969, 1980? Haven't we discussed that in our prelims lecture? Then this was the time period when the insurance companies were also getting nationalized. General insurance company, life insurance companies, yes or no? Sorry, the general, that is life insurance, and the general insurance companies, 1972, 73. So that means nationalization means bringing under state control, the first aspect. Second, it was also about bringing MRTP Act, Monopoly Restrictive Trade Practices Act, 1969. Clear? We have discussed that idea already in our industrial sector. Third is MRTP Act. Then we have FERA, Foreign Exchange Regulation Act, 1973. That is regulating the foreign exchange, foreign investment. This was with respect to the industries. But one more policy that was taken, that is a reservation for small scale industries. Small scale industries reservation. That means there are certain policies that were, certain sectors that were exclusively reserved for the small sector, that only the small sectors can produce that. So it is more like the policies, if you look at it, is more like preventing the concentration of wealth. Preventing the concentration of wealth. That if a company is becoming larger, it should not go beyond that size. The monopoly should be restricted. Why? Because if it become a monopoly, it will lead to the perish of some small scale industry that have been providing the same goods or services. So it prevents the formation of monopolies. At the same time, certain sectors that were reserved, the government procurement was confined to, for certain goods, for certain sectors, the government procurement was only confined to small scale industries. Not only that, when we look at the other policies, what about poverty alleviation program, guys? Here, directly targeting poverty alleviation program. Directly targeting poverty alleviation program. She was not like, hey, that trickle down growth model will be able to elevate the poverty. No. She is not like that. She was not like that. That the poor trickle down model will automatically lift the income of the people, bringing the people out of poverty. No. She is like Garibi Hatao slogan. I'm pretty sure that you must be remembering her famous Garibi Hatao slogan. Yes or no? You must be remembering her Garibi Hatao slogan. This was the time when directly targeted poverty alleviation programs were launched. These poverty alleviation programs were aimed to boost the employment. Whether that employment is in promoting self-employment programs, giving them credit so that they can generate self-employment, or wage-based employment programs. There were programs like Food for Work. There were programs like Swan Jayanti Shehri Rozgar Yojana, Integrated Rural Development Program. What are all these? All these policies indicated that this time, that during this phase, we went from a trickle-down growth development model to a basic needs approach development model. Remember, मैंने आपको बताया था basic needs. But along with that, the model get more and more skewed towards state-led. State-led. दो चीजें चल रही है, दो ट्रेंड्स चल रहे हैं, आप समझो. एक मैं आपको समझा रहा हूं कि स्टेट का क्या है, किस टाइप ऑफ पॉलिसीज वी आर अडॉप्टिंग, इंडस्ट्री, इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर. सेकंड, प्राइवेट सेक्टर, पब्लिक सेक्टर, वेयर द पॉलिसीज आर गोइंग ऑन. एंड थर्ड, इट इज अबाउट डेवलपमेंट मॉडल. ये जो अप्रोच ना, दैट विच अप्रोच. तो मैं आपको इस तीन वे में ना, थ्री वेज में, लाइक आई एम ट्राइंग टू एक्सप्लेन टू यू. I hope you understood. So this fits in our development approach. That was the basic needs approach development model. Now, this was the scenario. So 1965, after 1966, there were 3 annual plans. Now, after 3 annual plan, 1969 again started the 4th 5-year plan, resulted into 4 more 5-year plans till 1990. So till 7 5-year plans, our economy was more or less a closed economy. Are you getting my point? Till 7 5-year plans, if I talk about till 7 5-year plans, our economy was more or less a closed economy. Our economy was more or less a closed economy since independence. Clear? Development model, we have already seen that what development models we have witnessed. We have witnessed one trickle down growth model. Trickle down growth model. Yes or no? Second, we have seen the basic needs model. Basic needs approach. Here, even I have not highlighted, even during this program itself, various government programs were launched like Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan or ICDS, Integrated Child Development, Midday Meal Scheme, all these things. Okay? So like that. Now, all these policies that were adopted during the 7 5-year plans led to some structural problems in an economy. Some structural problems. And what were those some structural problems? We have discussed already that it created an economy which is low productivity economy. Low productivity in an economy. Low productivity in an economy. And why I can say low productivity in an economy? Look at this. Look at this. The policies, first of all, just tell me the policies that were adopted since independence till here. That policies, has it adopted economies of scale? No. So the economics of scale was not adopted. Yes or no? And when economies of scale was not adopted, just tell me one thing. Plus, chalo, main pehle aur likh leta hu. Plus, it was mainly import substitution. So that means I would say inward oriented. Hana? Closed borders, more like closed borders. So inward oriented. Plus, it was public led. Public led or state led development model. Policies are very clear. Economics of scale. Why we could not achieve that economics of scale? The policies like MRTP Act, the policies like SSI reservation. Yes or no? Those policies discourage the industries to grow big. Apart from the labor land laws, वो तो हम discuss ही नहीं कर रहे अभी. Inward oriented FERA Act, closed import substitution industrialization strategy, public led. अच्छा इसमें license quota raj system वो भी है. Yes or no? Just let me write it down here one by one. One is economics of scale like MRTP Act 1969, IPR 1956, the use of license quota raj here. So somehow it prevented economics of scale. I'm not elaborating. These aspects were discussed in the industry. Then SSI reservation. Yes or no? Clear? Then moving to inward oriented. Yes, import substitution industrialization strategy, use of tariffs and all. Then apart from that, FERA Act. Clear? FERA Act. Public led nationalization. Schedule A of IPR. Schedule A को पहले लिख लेना. Of IPR 1956. Yes or no? Schedule A of IPR 1956. So it is like more like Nehru-Mahalanobis strategy, focused on this only. The model of economic development was public led. Overall, what happened? This resulted into this resulted into poor technological adoption because there is no incentive. Try to understand, when there is no incentive, why no incentive that they should go for the technology? Because they are not facing any competition. There are no competition, and whatever it is, they are mainly led by the public. They are relying on the budgetary resources. Again, I'm saying, why no competition? Because it is inward oriented. They are not facing, yes or no, they are not facing any competition, so thereby they are not like any incentive to grow. And when there are no any incentive to adopt technology, all this leads to low innovation. When there is low innovation, resulting into low productivity and low efficiency in an economy. And when there is low productivity, low inefficiency, this public sector is going into losses, running into huge losses. So our economy was macroeconomically unsustainable. Macroeconomically. But while yes, there were problems in our economy should be undergoing a reform. एक होता है ना, एक पुश की जरूरत पड़ती है. हम होता है ना कि आप ये समझो, आप लोगों के साथ भी हो सकता है कि एक क्राइसिस हो सकती हो कि यू गाइज आर नॉट राइटिंग अ 3-hour टेस्ट. यू गाइज आर लाइक राइटिंग जस्ट ओनली डेली आंसर राइटिंग, यस और नो. लेकिन आपको पता है कि एक मेजर प्रॉब्लम है आपके अंदर 3-hour टेस्ट नहीं लिखने की, एक रेसिस्टेंस. यस और नो. सो यू गाइज आर नॉट राइटिंग दैट 3-hour टेस्ट. एंड व्हेन यू गाइज नॉट राइटिंग, तो एक स्ट्रक्चरल प्रॉब्लम है. लेकिन अब आपको पता है कि मुझे रिफॉर्म क्या चाहिए, यू हैव टू राइट. लेकिन यू आर नॉट एबल टू ब्रिंग दैट रिफॉर्म बिकॉज इट इज डिफिकल्ट टू ब्रिंग फ्रॉम इनसाइड. बट अगर आपको कोई पुश कर दे बहुत स्ट्रांगली, then don't you think the reform will occur? Yes. These structural problems were there. Our economically were highly unproductive, low efficient. We were facing losses everywhere. Fiscal deficit was also not good. No. So basically, these things were there. Our trade balance, it is skewed, like, or it is like always we are having a CAD, current account deficit. So thereby what happened, this structural problems combined with the immediate crisis that happened, that is known as Gulf War in 1991. This Gulf War in 1991, what happened? The Kuwaiti invasion by the Iraqis that led to the Gulf War. And that resulted into high international oil prices, resulted into high import bill. High import bill se kya hoga hamara? We have to pay them higher, resulting into low forex cover. And when we had a low forex cover, that is, we were having a forex cover of only 2 to 3 weeks. Thereby, our country could go bankrupt. So, ab kya kare? We had to go to the IMF to bail us out. And IMF imposed conditionalities कि जिस हिसाब से आप इकोनॉमी चला रहे हो ना, इस हिसाब से नहीं चलेगी. और यही ऑनेस्टली मैं सेम अप्रोच ना मैं आप लोगों के साथ भी करता हूं, जो भी मेंस मेंटरशिप में मेरे साथ रहते हैं. See, if you guys think कि सर I'll call you and give me guidance, I tell you, एक पहली कॉल आपके साथ में कर लेता हूं. But then what I do, I ask you to submit me the copies, then only I'll give you the specific feedback. If you don't impose that conditionalities, if you don't adopt that condition, I'm not going to call you. मेरा क्या जा रहा है? आप लोगों का करियर है. Tell me. So thereby, who adopted that conditionality, who adopt that condition, who submitting the copy to me, I call them and genuinely give them feedback that okay, this is what has to be done, specific to that student. We have around 300 plus students under this, like for this mains mentorship. But honestly, I'm telling you, I think how many of them are submitting copies? I think 25 or 30 3-hour copies. Daily answer writing, तो देखो, I don't look into that. वो तो क्या आप लोग अपना टाइम पास के लिए कर रहे हो और अपने आप को खुश कर रहे हो. I'm really telling you, वो सिर्फ और सिर्फ आप अपने आप को खुश कर रहे हो. अब अगर आप इस टाइम पर भी 3-hour टेस्ट नहीं लिख रहे हो, you remember कि आप कितना पीछे जा चुके हो आप बाकियों के कंपैरिजन में. So again, my sincere recommendation to you guys is practice 3-hour test. Please practice 3-hour test. ठीक है, बाकी तो it's up to you. So the point is, the problems were there in an economy, but to bring reforms, it required some external output. And that happened, you can say that conditions were facilitated during the Gulf War of 1991, which resulted into depletion of our forex reserves, leading to only forex cover of around 2 to 3 weeks of import. We were having only 2 to 3 weeks of import cover. We were about to go bankrupt, and therefore we went to IMF to bail us out. IMF put us conditionalities to adopt certain reforms, and those reforms which we also wanted to bring to reform our economy and also suggested by the IMF, those reforms are called LPG reforms. LPG reforms is actually nothing, guys. Please try to understand. It is actually liberalization. LPG is about liberalization, which means dismantling the barriers. Are you getting my point? LPG reforms is about dismantling the barriers. Dismantle the barriers होते हैं ना जो एक rigidities that stop you. Dismantle that. The conditions that you imposed on that okay, private sector cannot enter into this, or the high tariffs you are charging on the Indian goods, on the foreign coming goods. These conditionalities should be removing. Dismantle the barriers. Liberalization. That means giving them more and more freeness, freedom. Clear? Now, when this liberalization, that is dismantling the barriers, when you liberalize certain sectors within the economy, this resulted into privatization. That is entry of private sector. On the other hand, when you liberalize, when you dismantle the barriers on the external front, it results into globalization. Clear? That is G. It resulted into globalization. That is movement of people across the borders. Movement of people across the borders. Getting my point? This is what we call it as the external front. This is what we call it as LPG reforms. अब ये LPG reforms guys अलग अलग सेक्टर पे हम पढ़ चुके हैं. देखो एग्रीकल्चर में as such we have not adopted. Clear? But when I talk about the industrial sector, पढ़ लिया 1991 industrial policy. 1991 industrial policy, what reforms it brought? First, it brought de-reservation of public sector. Yes or no? It brought you can say abolition of compulsory licensing. It brought the disinvestment of the public sector. That is, the role of the government needs to be reduced. It bring the foreign direct investment, promote foreign direct investment, technological integration. It resulted into abolition of MRTP. तो restrictions हटाना है. तो ये तो इंडस्ट्री सेक्टर में किए थे. फाइनेंशियल सेक्टर में deregulation of interest rates. Earlier, the interest rates were actually finalized by the RBI, but those interest rates were deregulated, left to the banks to decide the interest rates by our own for the deposit, for giving the credit on that. Yes or no? Then next, we have that is new institutions, the creation of new financial institutions, because अच्छा second point आप ये लिख सकते हो entry of private sector banks have been coming into picture, private sector in the financial markets, insurance, they are coming into picture. So thereby to promote the growth of the financial market, financial institutions were created. SIDBI. अब SIDBI आपको लगता होगा सर SIDBI तो 1988 में बना है. No, SIDBI yes, but the statutory status was given in 1992. Clear? So statutory status was given later. Then the other institutions like PFRDA, IRDA, these institutions have been created. Yes or no? And then you see the recently also financial stability, FSDC, Financial Stability Development Council, IBBI, all these institutions, GST Council, these are what? New institutions that have been created. Clear? This is financial sector. Trade wise, if I talk about the reforms, trade sector. Trade sector mein tariffs were brought in. Sorry, tariffs were reduced. We like creation of WTO. When the WTO was created, we have seen already in our pre-lecture. Guys, ये मैं आपको एक यहाँ पे एक चीज दूंगा. देखो वैसे तो मैं ना प्री और मेंस को थोड़ा सा लेता हूं अलग ही, बट मैं आपको ये बोलूंगा यहां पे मैं एक कॉम्प्लीमेंट्री प्री का लेक्चर अटैच करूंगा, दैट इज WTO. व्हाट आई वांट इज गाइस कि आप ना वो लेक्चर देख लेना WTO का, एक कॉम्प्लीमेंट्री लेक्चर आई एम गोइंग टू अटैच आफ्टर दिस. ठीक है, एज अ बोनस लेक्चर यू सी, ताकि आपको ना WTO के बारे में पता चले, दीज एग्रीमेंट ऑन एग्रीकल्चर. तो वो जो बेसिक टर्म्स होते हैं ना कि अच्छा हाँ कि कौन सी सब्सिडीज वायलेट करते हैं, ऑल दैट कैन बी आंसर्ड इट हियर. आप उसको फास्ट दे सकते हो बिकॉज एक होता है ना प्री के जो पॉइंट्स होते हैं दैट हैज बीन देयर, बट आप उसको मैं अटैच करूंगा. ऑल दीज कंसेप्ट हैव बीन डिस्कस्ड देयर. WTO का पूरा मोस्ट फेवर्ड नेशन. तो ये जो स्पेसिफिक फैक्ट है ना वो मैं उधर लाइक स्पेसिफिक फैक्ट कैन बी आंसर्ड, मतलब कैन बी रिटन इन योर आंसर्स. क्योंकि मैं आपको बार बार बोलता हूं बिना स्पेसिफिक के आप जितनी भी झीक लगा लो आपके मार्क्स इंप्रूव नहीं होंगे. आप हर बार देखते होगे मैं कितनी स्पेसिफिसिटी की कोशिश करता हूं, दैट यार यहां पे कुछ स्पेसिफिसिटी है, चाहे मेरे को स्केड्यूल है, समथिंग इट ऑलवेज टू बी देयर. दैट इज द की टू गेट द हाई आंसर्स. ठीक है, सो ट्रेड में creation of WTO, the agreements like agriculture, then we have the TRIPS agreement, all that. अगर वो सिर्फ लेक्चर आप देखोगे ना तो ट्रिप्स एग्रीमेंट वाला जो क्वेश्चन आता है, इंटेलेक्चुअल प्रॉपर्टी वाला क्वेश्चन आता है, दैट कैन बी आंसर्ड इजीली. ठीक है, सो आई वांट यू टू वॉच दैट लेक्चर. देन नेक्स्ट इज trade sector is done, financial sector is done. So overall economy, if you try to see, the economy were liberalizing. That means the barriers were getting removed, and that is called as LPG reforms. Now it's been so many years. I say that you should have some critical analysis of economic reforms. 30 years of economic reforms. What is that critical analysis? What is that critical analysis? First, positive impact. Let me just highlight first of all the positive impact. Positive impact. Clear? Definitely the first point, increased economic growth. And let me tell you, please remember that after this, see देखो actual में just after independence 1947 till 1960-62 economy grew impressively, fine. But then after that, from that crisis period, that from 60s onwards till 1990, do you know we used to say that India's economic growth is compared with so-called Hindu rate of growth. India's economic growth rate was compared with so-called Hindus' growth rate. Why? This is simply an analogy being made that Indian economy is growing very slow. ये अगर कभी आपको कोई बोल रहा है ना that India's economic growth rate is similar to Hindus' rate of growth, that means Indian economy rate is very slow, something around of approximately 3 to 4%. Why? Why? मतलब देखो नंबर तो जरूरी नहीं है लेकिन but why? Because during that period, 1960s, 1970s, Hindus were growing at a rate which was almost similar to the India's economic growth rate. And what was India's economic growth rate? That is what I'm saying, 3 to 4%. So thereby, I think 1 or 2 years back only, I think Raghuram Rajan said that Indian economy is growing at a rate that is known as Hindus' rate of growth. So that what is that idea? Simply it wants to indicate that Indian economic growth rate is low. This is not something way that okay it's compared with, it is simply highlights, it's just an analogy being made. Okay? So thereby, now look at from this perspective, the economic reforms in that 30 years, the average growth rate if I take, it is 6 to 7%. Average growth rate post economic reforms till 2020, it has been an 6 to 7% in that 30 years. And that is surpassing, you could have mentioned, surpassing the Hindu rate of growth that was being that was happening just before LPG reforms. Clear? First point, that is impact on the economic growth. Second, obviously when our economy got opened, and in the economy we also suggested, like in the industrial policy, we were like promoting FDI. Yes or no? FERA Act got changed with the FEMA Act. One achievement, let me highlight, higher foreign investment. Although these are the points, but one major achievement I want to highlight here. India received $1 trillion in FDI since, I'm telling you, just note it down, since April 2000, and this achievement was possible till December 2024. This is the impact of LPG reform, that we were able to receive cross $1 trillion in FDI since April 2000. Can you imagine that? This is the power of opening economy. Not only that, अच्छा आप बोलोगे सर पैसा तो आ गया, सर इकोनॉमी भी ग्रो हो रही है, सर what about poverty? Let me show you. Even poverty, guys, there has been a faster rate of poverty eradication in the post-reform period. Faster reduction of poverty in the post-reform period. Poverty declined faster in the 2000s than in the 1990s. Look at this. Plus, I have given some fact. Not only that, the model of the economy, see this economy that was growing at this rate of 6 to 7%, this growth is supported by whom? By the tertiary sector. Already discussed the concept of structural transformation. I hope you remember that. So this fast economic growth was dominated by the service sector, led by service sector, which is contributing more than 50%, and even in the current economic survey, it highlights that service sector contributes around 54% of the GDP. Clear? 54% of the GDP. But then, sir, what about the industrial sector? Yes, industrial sector as such did not grow in the increasing the share of the GDP, but industrial productivity, it improved. But do you know, very important another point is liberalization. We liberalized on the trade front. One fact again I am highlighting it here. Again ये मैं वैसे प्री में मैंने बताया हुआ था, लेकिन मैं आपको फिर यहाँ पे यूज करना बता रहा हूँ. If you remember, we discussed the concept of trade to GDP ratio. That is trade to GDP ratio. This is how you measure the degree of openness in an economy. Yes or no? Trade to GDP ratio. That is measuring the degree of openness in an economy. Yes or no? Measuring the degree of openness in an economy. This increased from, let me tell you the exact fact here again. Just 1 minute. This trade to GDP ratio. 2-3 facts here I am going to talk about. So yes, so trade as a percentage of GDP was in the range of 12 to 15% in the 1980s, 16 to 25% in the 1990s. But the impact of economic reforms has been that it reached to more than 50% in 2011-12. So can you imagine, our economy grew, and that was sign that can be easily seen with our concept of trade to GDP ratio. From 12 to 15% in the 1980s to 16 to 25% in the 1990s, and going beyond 50% in 2011-12. बट आपने देखा होगा रिसेंटली कुछ ईयर्स से ना प्रोटेक्शनिस्ट पॉलिसीज चल रही थी, फिर अमेरिका फर्स्ट, देन वी हैव कोविड. यस और नो? सो बिकॉज ऑफ दैट टुडे आवर ट्रेड टू जीडीपी रेशियो हैज बीन अराउंड 45%. Not only that, another fact, you please write it down also. India's export share, this is economic survey fact, India's export share grew from 1.2% in 2005 to 2.4% in 2023. Our share in global exports has increased from 1.2% in 2005 to 2.4% in 2023. Sir, what about import? India's share in global imports grew from 1.5% to 2.9% during this same period. और सर मैं गुड्स एंड सर्विस दोनों का बता रहा हूं, तो ओवरऑल ऐसा मत बोलना सर ये गुड्स का है या सर्विसेज का है, ये दोनों का है. So this is overall I am telling you, that is combining both goods and services. So अब आप देखो overall, yes, we are a net importing country, but overall this has been the impact, positive impact of economic reforms. Not only that, when Indian economy has been able to generate more wealth, to liberalize the economy, brought more paisa, like brought more wealth into the country, foreign direct investment, government revenues also increased. No fact is there, but understanding government revenue also increased, which resulted which made the government to undertake various redistribution programs for the poverty. That's why you see the faster reduction in poverty. Not just only that, these redistribution programs, these welfare schemes that the government took resulted into improving social sector indicators, whether it be literacy rate, gross enrollment ratio, and all that. And do you know what kind of development model that was achieved here? Human development model. Yes or no? We have discussed this idea. Human development model, that is investing in the health, education. But add to that human development model in 2005 onwards, I told you, we adopted rights-based approach. Yes, we have to invest in human education. I'm not denying that. But you add the rights-based approach. That also. So these things, that is the result of economic reforms. Economic reforms which resulted into globalization. This LPG reforms which resulted into globalization actively promoted this NGOs, transnational NGOs, which were advocate of promoting the rights of the people, which were advocating the rights of this, like adoption of the rights-based approach to development model. So these are interlinked. आप ये मत सोच सकते हो कि गवर्नेंस अलग है या इकोनॉमी अलग है. नो, गवर्नेंस एंड इकोनॉमी तो आर वेरी इंट्रिकेटली लिंक्ड. दैट्स व्हाई यू सी आई टीच गवर्नेंस आल्सो. ठीक है. So improve impact in social indicators. Apart from that, one more, forex reserves. Yes, even today if you look at our forex reserves has been around $700 billion, covering more than 11 months of import cover. So 11 to 12 months of import cover as said by the economic survey. कंज्यूमरिज्म तो यार मतलब इकोनॉमिक रिफॉर्म छोड़ो, कंज्यूमरिज्म तो आज सोशल मीडिया ने अलग लेवल पे बढ़ा दिया. क्लियर? सो दिस इज इंपैक्ट, बट दिस इज पॉजिटिव. You have to highlight some negative. Negatively, broadly remember 2 points. Broadly. So that then you can put in inside it some fodder. One, negatively, sectoral inequalities. Sectoral inequalities. Sectoral inequalities, if you look at the economic reforms, it favored whom more? Which sector? Service sector. Neglected manufacturing, neglected agriculture. दोनों का इम्पैक्ट देखा नहीं देखा है? एग्रीकल्चर में याद है एग्रीकल्चर क्रेडिट कैसे डिक्लाइन हुआ था? फिर हमने 1998 में क्रेडिट कार्ड लाए. देन वी वेंट फॉर दी अनदर स्कीम, दैट इज इंटरेस्ट सबवेंशन स्कीम. फिर क्रेडिट वापस इंक्रीज हुआ. रिमेंबर दैट, देखो उसको. नॉट ओनली दैट, manufacturing sector, the share was limited. We have discussed that in industrial sector also. अब मैन्युफैक्चरिंग जब ग्रो नहीं होगी तो एम्प्लॉयमेंट कैसे जनरेट होगा? सो द फर्स्ट पॉइंट दैट आई वांटेड टू हाईलाइट इज सेक्टोरल इनइक्वालिटी. सेकंड, income inequality. Definitely the income inequality, top people holds higher percentage of the wealth as compared to this. The latest report, that is top 1% hold 40% of the country's wealth, and the bottom 50 hold only 3% of the country's wealth. This is another. Third, with respect to employment, it resulted into jobless growth. When I say jobless growth, what I mean it here is it resulted in a growth which is first of all not generating much jobs because it is dominated by service sector. Second, even the jobs that is being generated for the others, they are mainly in the informal sector, for which the working conditions are not good, proper social security is not there. ये सब issue में unemployment पे देख लेंगे. But this is majorly you see the negative impact of economic reforms. Clear? So this I think guys you can see here same cheese, economic reforms resulting into sectoral imbalances and inequalities. Clear? It was disproportionately led by service sector, did not lead to sustained growth of manufacturing, share of agriculture in GDP also declined. Inequalities have also increased post independence period. We have the data. Clear? We have the Gini coefficient also that. Third is jobless growth. In these three areas you could have seen that. Clear? This is about the economic reforms. But has the economic reforms end here? No. Economic reforms are continuously going, guys, continuously. Even the major structural reforms that you see, the GST, demonetization, digitalization of economy, these are part of economic reforms only. Some of the recent economic reforms that have been undertaken. Labor codes, a major structural reform measure that has been undertaken. Although, yes, not implemented, but one of the major structural reform measure. Yes or no? So thereby, I told you, if you look at the impact of economic reforms, negative wise, it created inequality, whether it be sectoral, whether it be employment wise, or whether it be income wise. Clear? It resulted into inequality. That's why the next part that come into picture is inclusive growth. Clear? Inclusive growth. That's why from 11th 5-year plan, the concept of inclusive growth, although enshrined in our constitution, implicitly mentioned, but explicitly the first time this term was mentioned in the 11th 5-year plan, and 12th 5-year plan also carried forward this inclusive growth. Yes, there's a separate chapter on inclusive growth and financial inclusion, but I just put it so that you know, okay, how we are going it. So now when we'll be talking about inclusive growth separately, but just I want to end this lecture with highlighting the current India's developmental challenges across various dimensions, guys. These are the various developmental challenges that our country, or like these are being faced in our country. First, economic dimension, poverty. Guys, this is the latest fact that I have mentioned of the the national MPA. Clear? Then we have wealth inequality. Bottom 50% only possesses 3%. Clear? So here, richest 5% or more than 60%. Informal sector, agrarian distress, manufacturing, high logistic, all of these are facts. तो मेरा पॉइंट ये इसीलिए है देने का, so that you have the points at one place with the exact facts, with the correct facts. So economic dimensions, then we have governance, corruption, transparency. Look at this fact. Ineffective implementation, fragmented governance, policy paralysis, structural deficiencies. Then we have social dimensions like skill gap, healthcare, gender-based violence, malnutrition, drinking water, all these problems. These are what? Development challenges only. Urbanization. Then we have other dimensions like regional climate change vulnerability. You see, I thought I put it a fact from the climate report. There were various climate report that shows that, okay, India is at a risk of vulnerability. I think how come I have forgotten. So you see that there's a climate report that can be mentioned here. Okay? Then we have protectionist trade policies, WTO, all that aspect. So guys, this is all about the India's developmental policies that have been adopted since independence. Clear? So I hope you must have enjoyed this lecture. What I'm going to give you along this lecture, a bonus lecture on WTO, guys. So I would suggest you to read that. और क्यों ना आपको एक और बोनस लेक्चर दे दूं? वैसे तो देखो यूपीएससी में आया नहीं है, बट आई थिंक मुझे लगता है दे देना चाहिए. व्हाट इज दैट? माइट बी जस्ट 30 मिनट्स का होगा, बट एक बोनस लेक्चर इज अ केस लाइक चेंज इन द नेचर ऑफ प्लानिंग. ब्रॉडली तो आपने देख लिया, मैंने आपको बता दिया, लेकिन स्पेसिफिकली दैट हाउ देयर इज अ चेंज इन द नेचर ऑफ प्लानिंग फ्रॉम द 1947 टिल 1991. वी कॉल दैट प्लानिंग एज अ इंपरेटिव प्लानिंग. फिर 1991 से 2014 is called indicative planning. Then from that, the Niti Aayog as a think tank based, evidence based policy, all that. Chalo, I think I'll try to take a small bonus lecture on that change in the nature of planning explicitly, although implicitly covered here, but explicitly. So take care, guys. Study well. All the best.